This academic success module explores test preparation and studying. Quizzes, tests, and exams are common in college-level courses because they help instructors assess what students have learned, and they help students demonstrate what they know and can do with this learning. Our goal in this module is to introduce some ideas that might inform how you approach test preparation. Before we begin, we have a few ideas that underlie the approach we've taken with this module. First, there can be a lot of variation between exam types: online versus in-person, open book versus closed book, multiple choice versus problem-based, cumulative versus non-cumulative. Even the course content can impact the format or look of the exam. Consider the types of exams that occur in your current courses and think about how the strategies that follow could be adapted to suit your needs. Second, test preparation doesn't begin the day of or even a few days before the test. It takes place each day and each week leading up to the exam. Weekly reading assignments, videos, lectures, labs, and even quizzes and homework are activities designed to help you learn course content. Treat them as such. Every moment that you dedicate time to learning course material contributes to your readiness for the exam. Third, we're sorry to say there isn't one magic wand when it comes to studying. In this module, we'll provide some examples of ways to study, but effective study techniques vary between course material and people. Be open to new ways to study, evaluate if they're working for you, and add variety. Being able to adapt your approach to learning is a key skill employers are looking for in today's ever-changing workforce. This section of the module explores some basic information from the field of cognitive psychology. Our goal in this section is to provide you with information about how your brains work and introduce results from research studies that may impact how you prepare for exams. We regularly hear a few key frustrations from students regarding test preparation. I started studying the day before the test. The test was really hard. The questions asked were very difficult. Or, I knew it, but I couldn't remember it on the exam. I blanked. We'll explore some of the reasons why this happens and provide some tips for how to approach studying differently. Let's start with the common practice of cramming. Cramming refers to the practice of studying all of the information or attempting to learn all course content in a single study session or in back-to-back sessions. As mentioned in the module on how to learn, initial learning, which is what you do when you cram, transfers information to your short-term memory but not your long-term memory. Unfortunately, short-term memory can only hold a few pieces of information at a time, and only for a short period of time. When we rely on last-minute studying, we're only able to hold information in our short-term memory, and thus there is a threat of forgetting. As we mentioned in the module on how to learn, there are many ways to help increase your learning by spreading out your studying. When you spread out your studies, you will encode information in your memory in multiple ways, thus increasing your chance of recall. The recommendation here is to spread out your studying over time. We often hear students have to resort to cramming because they don't have enough time. While cramming is better than not studying at all, when we cram, we don't leave enough time to transfer information to long-term memory. Spacing out your studying over time provides opportunities to encode, practice, consolidate, and review information at a more relaxed pace. You'll also go into the test more confident. Now that we've reviewed the importance of spacing out your studying, let's move on to the second concern we hear from students. When students say that their test was too hard or that the questions were difficult, one possibility is that their studying wasn't as in-depth as the exam required. Students often study with the goal of memorizing the facts and information from the textbook and lecture. However, many exams ask you for higher-level thinking and not merely rote memorization. To use higher-level thinking skills, you'll need to have a base knowledge of the subject matter. You'll enrich this base knowledge by reviewing information over the term. As mentioned in the How to Learn module, when you distribute your studying throughout the term, you'll have the opportunity to know the information and transfer it to your long-term memory. For example, recalling information on an essay test will help you make connections and develop arguments. We can go beyond surface-level learning when we practice looking for patterns and making connections when we study. Our brains are naturally pattern seekers. When we encounter new information, we look for ways to organize the information into categories and see relationships between items. Consider, for example, this graphic representing breeds of dogs. Rather than memorizing the distinct features of 181 dog breeds, it might help to see the similarities and differences between some breeds based on size, purpose, function, and other features. Hierarchies, schemas, and associative networks are all ways our brains organize information and find connections between the new information and our existing knowledge. We aid the storage of information when we create connections between the new information and our existing knowledge. An example of patterns and connections in action is the study matrix. The examples on this page illustrate how information from a textbook or lecture can be organized to capture the relationship between the concepts. Other examples include timelines, mind maps, outlines, and diagrams. Creating these types of study tools help you develop a strong understanding of the material and organizes the information in patterns that your brain will be able to remember. The recommendation from this section is to aim for deeper learning. Take your studying beyond memorization. Aim to understand information and be able to apply it. This approach will make it easier to remember the information and it will give you a greater ability to answer unfamiliar test questions. The final common issue students encounter is a false sense of confidence in their ability to remember information. We hear students say, "I thought I knew it, but I couldn't remember it on the test." Students may attribute this to blanking or test anxiety. However, in many cases, what has happened is that we learned information once, but it never fully stored in long-term memory. Or it was stored but not revisited and therefore forgotten. Information can be lost or forgotten over time if it isn't regularly practiced. So the question we ask ourselves is, how can we be sure we can recall information during the exam? 3 possibilities we will discuss are self-testing, overlearning, and interleaved practice. Self-testing refers to the idea of answering questions for practice prior to the actual graded test. Look at these results. In 2006, Roediger and Karpike looked at the recall performance of students who studied and restudied compared to students who studied and then took a practice test. After a week, the students who took the practice test were able to remember more than students who simply restudied the material. This study and others like it underlie the importance of self-testing as part of the study process. Answering practice questions and problems and creating practice tests are techniques that have been found to be effective in maximizing recall on test performance. You may also explore more ways to practice self-testing. There are hundreds of ways to study, but students don't always explore these ways to study. Many students spend most of their study time with activities on the left side of this grid, but those are most optimal for initial learning. They don't test your recall. It is equally important to engage in study activities that test your ability to retrieve information from long-term memory when needed. There are dozens of ways to practice information. Find techniques that work with the course material and your study approach and preferences. Be creative. Remember, the more ways you encode, the more pathways to retrieval. Another method for promoting storage and recall of information is overlearning. Overlearning refers to the practice of learning the material even after it's been stored in long-term memory. For example, if you were learning a flashcard and you remembered the information after 4 attempts, you might test yourself an additional 4 times to make sure that information is stored beyond the original learning. One way to think of it is this: don't practice until you get it right, practice until you can't get it wrong. If you tend to get anxious about tests, overlearning will help give you confidence when it's time for the test. Finally, we can enhance the accuracy of our recall through interleaved practice. Interleaved practice is the approach of alternating types of problems in your review. It's a bit counterintuitive. Course topics tend to be introduced thematically, and we tend to study that way. If you're taking an elementary math course, 1 unit is about addition. So you will do all of your addition review problems at the same time. The next unit is about subtraction. So you do all of your subtraction review problems at the same time. The last unit is about multiplication, and you also do all of the multiplication review problems at the same time. Most people will do all of their addition review problems at once and then move on to the subtraction review problems. That is called blocked practice. In contrast, interleaved practice is the act of mixing up the order of questions when self-testing and self-quizzing. Rohrer and Taylor compared these 2 approaches, and look what they found. During the practice, students who studied in the blocked method performed better, but in the test situation, they performed worse. For the interleaved students, their performance during practice was lower, but it was a more accurate prediction of their actual test performance, and their performance was higher than those who studied with the blocked method. Dunlowski and colleagues explain this effect. Interleaved practice helps you learn to discriminate between different concepts. In this example, you practice many different types of math problems and gain experience identifying the relevant approach or formula for each problem type or concept. You test yourself not only on solving the problem, but on recognizing the solution method. It's more similar to the test situation and will give you a more accurate test of your recall. The recommendation for this final issue is to engage in self-testing and practice on a regular basis. In many cases, what happens is that we learned information once, but it was never fully stored in long-term memory, or it was stored, but not revisited and thus forgotten. Information can be lost or forgotten over time if it isn't regularly practiced. Self-testing, overlearning, and creating practice tests using interleaved practice are all techniques that allow you to practice recalling information from your memory. Now that we've talked through the primary issues students share about test prep and studying, we'll focus on how to set up the study plan and get to work. Our chief recommendation in this section is to take the time to create a plan for test preparation. There are a lot of formats you can use for a study plan, but the following tips remain true regardless of the format. Break your studying into small chunks. Don't set yourself up to study for 6 hours at a time without a break. Your concentration and focus will suffer. Make goals for your study sessions. These will help you stay on track and stay organized. Consider the people and resources that will help you along the way. Apply the memory process to your decisions about how to study. Aim to be realistic with yourself. If you have 7 days left until your big test, acknowledge that. Utilize the 7 days you have to study in a way that will actually benefit you on the test. Trying to thoroughly read 10 chapters of chemistry in 1 week might not be a realistic or a good use of your time. There are a lot of approaches to organizing and designing your test preparation. The study cycle and the SOLPA 5-step strategy are 2 of them. A study plan is the translation of these approaches into an actual schedule and plan of action. Making this concrete for yourself has many advantages. An intentional plan can help you allocate adequate time for studying, decrease the stress around balancing your time, and make time for sleep, eating, and exercise as well. An hour or 2 spent organizing and planning your approach to studying will pay off. One step to creating a study plan is to map out your study time and activities around your current schedule. We'll walk through the process of filling out a weekly calendar in preparation for an exam. This calendar will help you map out your time and develop a schedule to follow as you get ready for your upcoming test. To begin, you'll want to fill in the days on the top row. If your test is coming up on a Friday, you can start out your study calendar from the Saturday before the test. When you prioritize your calendar in this format, you can plan what you're going to do for the full 7 days up until you have your test. You can also plan out topics you need to study or study activities for your time on the left side of the calendar. Next, it's time to start filling in your fixed commitments. This includes your classes, club or chapter meetings you attend every week, family commitments and work hours, study tables you've joined, and your regular meals and workout times. Once you've blocked out your commitments on your schedule, you can start to plan out your study time. Block out the time you are taking the test on Friday. Then decide how many hours you want to study. I want to study for 8 hours, so I will block out 8 hours in the schedule. But after the initial 8 hours, I will block out 3 more hours. These 3 extra hours build flex time into my study schedule in case something comes up or if I don't feel ready and need more time to study. By overlearning the material, studying even after I learn the material, I can reduce the likelihood of forgetting the information during the test. On this schedule, I also wrote down the topics I need to study for my test. The next step is to decide what study activities will help me learn the material in the 11 hours I blocked off for studying. At the bottom of the study plan, I've placed study activities I will do when studying. As you are deciding on study activities, consider the types of strategies that will help you learn information initially, but also make time for the review and self-testing activities as you start to master the material as you get closer to the test itself. As you're testing yourself on material, make sure to hold yourself accountable for the information. Don't cheat yourself by peeking at your notes or textbook. If you need to look at your notes or textbook, keep testing yourself until you can remember without looking. Don't underestimate the helpfulness of overlearning, particularly if you tend to get nervous during tests. You can also increase testing recall by practicing information in different directions. Quite often, we only test ourselves in one direction. With flashcards, vocabulary, or other concepts, we ask ourselves what the meaning of the word is. Remember to also flip the cards around, or reverse the way you're asking it, and test your ability to recall the word based on the definition. Engage in interleaved practice. Whether you're taking a full practice test or just answering questions from memory, mix up the order of the questions and interleave concepts from different chapters to ensure you're prepared for the format and layout of the test. Another great resource to consider is forming a study group. If you want to create a successful study group, you need to start out with setting a goal. Saying, "I want to study for the test together," is not a goal. It's better to decide what you want to study, how much you want to study, and how long it will take. An example of a group study goal is, I want to have a study guide completed over chapters 4 and 5 in the next 2 hours. The goal helps the group have a focus. It's also important to come prepared to the study group. Be prepared to ask questions and share insight into what you're studying. Make sure you've done your reading and homework first so that when you take time to check in and quiz each other, you're prepared. Have a focus. Get one person to take the leadership role and have them pose questions or problems to the group. Decide on the answer as a group. Once everyone understands the problem, move on to the next question. After a few questions, switch lead roles. Practice quizzing each other. Quizzing a friend is easier and takes less time than flashcards. If the person is struggling, give them hints or clues. If the person misses it again, explain it in your own words. Teaching a concept will show if you know the material. Challenge one another. Don't take one person's word for every answer. Have the person who answered explain their reasoning. When your study buddy defends their point, it shows a deeper level of understanding of the material. Review. At the end of every session, spend 10 minutes reviewing what you went over and the areas you missed. Creating a successful study group experience can also create accountability to your time and study sessions. Based on the module that just ended, what 3 strategies might you implement to improve your own test preparation? Thank you for joining us for this test preparation and studying module. Please visit our website at success.oregonstate.edu/learning-corner for more information on study tips.